Kings, Explorers, and Native Americans. We usually think about explorers like Christopher Columbus as discovering America. But did they? Actually, there were people living here for centuries before Columbus. Native American Indian tribes like the Iroquois, the Seminoles, the Croatoans, the Wampanoag, plus many others, woodland, plains, and mountain groups. Probably the first European explorers to North America were the Vikings. They came from what we know today as Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. They traveled and explored and traded, but didn't make any real settlements. Leif Erikson is probably the best-known Viking explorer who came about 500 years before Columbus. England and Spain were traders also, but they traveled to the east, to Asia, especially India and China, and it was always a very long trip. Men like Christopher Columbus were sure if they traveled west instead of east, they would end up in Asia, and it would be a much shorter trip. So Christopher Columbus persuaded the King and Queen of Spain, Ferdinand and Isabella, it could be done. In 1492, he started out with 3 ships, the Niña, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. He thought he had made it, but he actually bumped into America, not India. He even called the natives he found Indians and began searching for gold, which is what the king and queen really wanted. He went back to Spain with treasures and set out again. He never actually reached what is today the United States, but he was in the Caribbean Sea just south of today's Florida. One of his men, Ponce de Leon, decided to stay in the area, and he actually reached what is today Florida and claimed it for Spain. The Native Americans there were part of the Creek tribe or Seminoles. Florida was not part of the 13 colonies, but stayed part of Spain for many years. There was a lot of competition between England and Spain, so the English King Henry VII sent his own explorer, John Cabot. He went much further north, and he too thought he was in Asia, China to be exact. But he had actually reached what is now part of Canada. He went back and told the king he had found China. European ships and fishermen began stopping in along the east coast and managed to introduce diseases to the Native Americans that killed thousands. About 90 years after Columbus and Cabot's voyages, Queen Elizabeth of England wanted some of that gold that the Spanish had found. That's when she tried to establish the colony of Roanoke. The natives in the area were Croatoan, and we have actual drawings made of them and their dome-shaped homes. Unfortunately, the colony disappeared. 20 years after Roanoke, the now King James sent John Smith and 3 ships of colonists to what became Jamestown. This was Powhatan's territory. He had inherited 4 tribes but conquered another 30 by the time John Smith arrived. A chief from a neighboring tribe, the Potomac, helped kidnap Powhatan's daughter Pocahontas and sold her to the English. The price? A copper kettle. About the same time, the Dutch sent Henry Hudson to explore, looking for a route to get to the Pacific Ocean. He spent his time in what is now New York and parts of Canada. The Native Americans there were Iroquois. He didn't start any colony himself, but the Dutch soon began the colony of New Amsterdam. Another 14 years later, Charles II is King of England, and the Mayflower arrives with the Pilgrims in Plymouth. By this time, the number of Native Americans in the area had been reduced from about 30,000 to 7,000, largely by disease. The tribes here were the Wampanoag and the Narragansett. They grew corn, beans, and squash, fished, and hunted. Despite the fact that the Europeans came in and took over the land that was theirs, in many cases the native population worked with and helped the colonists learn how to live in the new land. Those stories seem to have been overshadowed by the often brutal attacks that were suffered by the colonists. Unfortunately, the native population was almost wiped out in the colonies. Kings, explorers, and Native Americans all played a part in the development of colonial America.